doing with the ordinances. And again, it's not local law isn't going to change the world. And there's some literature over here for folks to look at. I won't get into a lot, but we're looking to also create a network, kind of county size or region for Pennsylvania right now, Pennsylvania Community Rights Network, with the goal of calling a People's Constitutional Convention to rewrite the fucker. That's where we're going, and that's actually, we have chapters already established and we're working for more. It isn't about staying local, it's about building. It really is grassroots. It's about going from the bottom up, because that's where the governing decision should come from. That was the theory, that's what we're told in school. But the private property question really also brings in the rights of nature question. I often say my shorthand answer to that is the right to own property doesn't convey with it the right to use that property in a way that destroys the rights of your neighbors. So when people say, you can't pass a law banning fracking because I was planning to, that was my retirement plan for my land, you know? And my answer is, well, what if you decided that your retirement plan was to burn old tires on your field? But there's a law in place locally that says you can't do that because that would pose a threat to the health, safety, and welfare of the community. Fracking's no different. It's not issue focused, and I agree completely with what James has said. You know, and you've heard me say this, Wanda. You know, I know you have, that underneath all of it, underneath it all, it's not about the landfills or the fracking or the whatever. That's the symptoms of the disease. We have to cure the disease, and the disease is I say the denial of the right to local self-government. Another way of saying it is the denial of the commons, the denial of the ability of the people within their community. And how do we define community? I'll be honest, for shorthand, practical reasons, in order to use this legal tactic, we've been just accepting the established municipal boundaries as our community. We understand that they're artificial, but that's a convenient tool. And we also use the same language for the people to use the municipality as their convenient tool for self-governance in their community. It's not ideal. If we ever get to rewrite that Constitution, it can all change, because that's boundaries that you can't see from space. They can be changed, right? Yeah. But private property, in terms of rights of nature, we actually have recognition of the rights of natural communities and ecosystems to exist, flourish, and naturally evolve. That's language right in these ordinances. What does it mean? Well, I'm not trying to be metaphysical here or philosophical merely. There's a pragmatic side to it. The very first community to adopt it is a very conservative community in anthracite country, in Schuylkill County. Why would they say yes to that? Why would they? Because it actually empowered every member of the community. We also have a citizen enforcement provision in the ordinances. If the municipality won't enforce it, any member of the community can. Go to court, here's our law, you got to make this happen, Judge. In terms of rights of nature, every member of the community has standing to go before the court and advocate for the rights of the ecosystem. Why would we do that? And why do conservative communities say, let's do it? And the answer is, and it really can be translated into the commons. We don't use that language, but it can directly be connected to that. It says, because under current law, I live in Tamaqua. That's the first community to do it. We have over 20, maybe 25 communities that have recognized rights of nature at this point.
Where's that?
Tamaqua is in Schuylkill County. 2006, it was the first community to do it. Oh, and then we went to Ecuador in 2008. They had constitutionalized it. And it's funny, one little council member in Tamaqua said, yeah, let's do it. And I think that it's like the butterfly effect. If that hadn't happened, I don't know that Ecuador would have happened. It would not have been that conversation. Right? But to be clear, what happens? You go to court right now and you say, Your Honor, I don't want them to clear cut that forest. And the judge's first question is, oh, so it's your land? No, it's not my land. Oh, well, what is your actual interest in this property? Do you have adjoining land where the property value will go down? Is that what you're arguing? Oh, no, Your Honor, I live on the other side of town. Oh, so you're not going to actually experience a direct tangible harm. Tangible meaning how many bucks is it going to cost you? What are you going to lose in dollars, right? And if you say, I'm not going to lose any dollars, but it's going to ruin the ecosystem, Your Honor. Sorry, you have no standing. There is no harm. No harm means no case. Out of here. Recognizing the rights of nature means that every member of the community, regardless of what their legal relationship is to that parcel of land, that enclosed area, has standing to go before the court in a similar capacity to an adult who goes to court to advocate for the rights of a minor. The minor doesn't have legal standing to go to court and argue his or her case, so there is someone who goes in and advocates, an adult who does, right? A member of the community goes in and advocates for the rights of the forest, the stream, that doesn't know English, can't show up in court, and goes in and argues for those rights. It's an empowerment of the community to protect, even though it's privately claimed, and I think it goes to your question a little bit too, even though it's private property, that forest, the land that it's on, there is a new, and I admit this, there is a new limitation, if you want to call it the enjoyment of private property. I would say clear cutting and taking money for it is not, I don't know how much joy there is in that, but there's certainly some financial gain. But it actually empowers the community to trump that decision and say you may enjoy peaceful enjoyment of your home and property, is something that isn't dissolved by recognizing rights of nature. But there are limitations placed on it, just as there are with you can't burn tires in your backyard. There's a limit to what you can do. The right to own property and the privileges that come with the enclosure or the deed are limited. They are not open-ended. And the community puts limits on that. By the way, it's a theory of law that isn't strange to current law. Courts will agree that the enjoyment of private property has its limits. Even in zoning, they'll say, well, if you've zoned it so that this particular use it can't be done, this particular use, as long as you've left some financial means of benefiting, the owner benefiting from ownership of that land, you have not stripped them of, it's not a complete government takings, under the Fifth Amendment and all of that. So what I'm saying is we have tools, and I think rights of nature puts us in it also, by the way, in my opinion, that's something, James, I wanted to ask you about. A concept like that, do you see that as somehow diminishing the sense of the commons? When I hear some folks talk about the commons, what I get is, and I don't think this is what you're saying, but I get the sense that a commons is common property, and that nature is property. And understanding the rights of nature takes nature out of the category of property and puts it into the category of being part of the community, protected by law of that sort.
Gosh, that's a very deep question, and so I don't know how to answer it simply other than to say that there are two different perspectives on it. One is that the more recent perspective is that it is a kind of community-based right, and the other perspective is that it precedes community. The right to nature really has an inalienable sense that is beyond the community, and then it gets down to the meaning of what is inalienable. Is it something that if it takes the community to make the right in which they have a relationship with the commons, it involves people and a resource to make something inalienable, or does the resource itself have an inalienability intrinsically? And so there's two different perspectives on it. And the commons movement is it's mixed in terms of its own judgment about what the meaning of that is.
Can I say something there? But it's also just about our language. We do know that we don't have a future language yet about it.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes I feel like, when I've listened to you speak a few times, there's a piece of language, and you now, that it's just still in that system. It's not because our brains haven't gotten there, or our hearts haven't gotten there, or our world hasn't gotten there, it's just our language hasn't caught up yet. So I think that to me is sometimes, would you agree to that, or?
Yeah.
Or that's what it seems like to me.
Well, social scientists for years and years, and centuries, have been complaining that society doesn't have an ontological system, meaning that it's not, social rules and institutions don't reflect the presence of people or resources, and therefore they become bureaucratic, they become full of inertia, time lags, they're not responsive, they get crystallized, so that we know that society is not, social institutions are not ontological. And therefore, the quest has always been, how could the legal system itself become much more responsive to our immediate needs, demands, deeper inner subjectivity, as well as the intrinsic value of nature? How does that reflect itself on an immediate basis through law? Can it possibly ever do that? So it opens up this question, and I think that that's what the debate is now turning to globally about how that's possible. Because now that we are a global brain, or we have the technology and we have greater integration and greater concern and everything that's driving this new kind of global process, that question becomes really paramount. And a lot of people are giving that a lot of thought, because if we do have a kind of system of global governance in the future, and we're going to have to do that if we're coming to a new monetary system, and we know that, as in the case of Europe, you can't rush into a monetary system without creating a cultural integration, fiscal integration, political integration first, because things are breaking down there, and it's really clear that we should not do that on a global basis. If we're running into the area of creating a new kind of global governance, we better address the issue of inalienability of rights very soon. And it can't be based on the UN definition of it through the UN Declaration of Human Rights. It's got to be a post kind of definition, because that old definition is not going to be suitable as we move forward. So it's going to be nature, it's going to be human rights, it's going to be the rights of the commons and the rights of people to interact with the commons. Commons, 5 structural principles. There's people, the resources themselves, informal rules that manage those resources, boundaries that are not really privatizational boundaries. They can be, but it's usually the boundaries that the people that decide that of inclusion of members in the community, as well as the resources that are staked as a claim. And then finally, the value that's created by that particular commons. All of those are clues to lead us to that different definition of inalienability. But if we just look at it from the social plane, we won't get there. We have to look at it from a more ontological perspective, it seems to me.
Did most people here to hear Winona LaDuke last night? When talking about language, that to me was an exercise in someone who talks out of a different language system that is embedded in a history that, as she said, goes back 2,000 years. And so her way of talking is very interesting to listen to, because it suspends all of the categories that we use to understand property and our relationship to each other, to other animals, stones, all my relations. And so when she says it, it's crystal clear. It's very difficult for us to think like that. I can understand it. When she says it, it's very clear to me. But to be able to speak in that fashion is something that we don't have. We don't have that language. But it seems to me that there's very interesting guidance there in terms of how you enter into that cultural mindset in order to have a different foundation for basic law.
Thank you very much for bringing that up, because that really segues beautifully, I think, into the last thing. We're a little over, but we started a little late, so hopefully you can bear with us here. The next thing is, how do we, why